welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So this is where we take a stack of your sources, the articles, the research, all those fascinating rabbit holes you've been exploring, and we really dig in.
Yeah, we try to find the gems, the surprising bits, the insights that, help you get informed fast.
Exactly. And today, our stack is actually built around one specific book, a really wonderful one you shared with us.
Which one is that?
It's a 1921 anthology called Modern Essays, and it was selected by Christopher Morley.
Ah, Morley.
And right for the preface, he sets this amazing stage. He doesn't just see himself as compiling essays. He says he's like a host.
A host? How so?
He's inviting you, the reader, into a conversation among these different pieces. He pictures it like sharing his favorite books with a friend late at night.
Oh, I like that. Informal.
Totally.
Yeah.
He uses the phrase dressing gown and slippers. Meant to be comfortable, easy reading.
That analogy, being a host, that feels really key, doesn't it?
It does.
So our mission today, I guess, starting with this collection, is to unpack that. Understand Morley's view of the essay form itself.
Right.
But also, maybe even more exciting, dig into the incredibly diverse perspectives and, honestly, some really unexpected ideas in the essays he actually picked.
He mentions mixing British and American writers, right? Hoping for some friendliness.
Yeah, Anglo-American friendliness, he called it. And he wasn't afraid to slip in some lesser-known stuff alongside the big names.
Okay, so if he's the host,
yeah,
what kind of party is this? What did Morley think an essay actually was?
Well, he defines it as an attempt. That's the word he uses.
An attempt?
Yeah, and he's pretty clear it's not a short story, not really a memoir either. For Morley, the essay, it has this tendency to generalize, to kind of walk around the subject.
Circle it.
Exactly. Look at it from several vantages. It's an exploration, not necessarily a final answer.
Okay.
And what he thinks is really special about it, the essay's genius, he calls it, is the rich bouquet of personality. He totally believed the author's voice, their specific viewpoint, is central. He talks about a conscious revelation of self done inadvertently.
Done inadvertently. I like that. You learn about the writer just by watching them think.
Precisely. The personality isn't the main subject, but it shapes how the subject gets explored.
So his role as anthologist, the host, is sort of like choosing the right mix of people for a dinner party.
Kinda, yeah. Making sure they're congenial, keeping the conversation, or as he says, the wine and tobacco flowing.
Making them feel comfortable.
Throwing them out, yeah. Getting them to share their unique takes. His goal, he says, is entertainment of the most genuine sort.
Not just academic.
No, definitely not. It's a curated experience. And the fact that he deliberately left out some widely bruited essayists.
The really famous one.
Right. It shows he was prioritizing this kind of experience, this kind of discovery, making room for things you might otherwise miss.
And his little notes on each author fit that too, right? Like you're just browsing his shelves with him.
Totally. That dressing gown and slippers vibe again. He even gives a shout out to Canada, saying a couple of essays from there blend the best of British and American styles.
Okay, let's unpack some of these guests then, because this is where it gets really interesting. The range here is just huge. It throws you into totally different worlds.
It absolutely does. You swing from, deep philosophy to laugh out loud funny. Where should we start? Maybe with one of the big philosophical ones.
That's a good.
Okay, Bertrand Russell, A Free Man's Worship. This one, it doesn't mess around. It tackles humanity's place in what seems like a pretty cold, indifferent universe.
And it kicks off with that really dark story, doesn't it? Mephistopheles telling Faustus about God getting bored.
Yeah, bored with praise he deserves. So he decides it'd be more interesting to get praise from beings he deliberately tortures.
Wow. That's a heck of a starting point. Bleak.
It is bleak. And it perfectly sets up Russell's main argument, this fundamental opposition of fact and ideal, meaning the world as it actually is, the universe of fact, it's not inherently good. Power is often, bad, destructive.
So what's the choice?
The choice Russell presents is, do you worship that force, that cosmic indifference, or do you worship goodness, the ideal that you hold inside yourself?
And his answer?
It's this really powerful, defiant call for humanism. He urges us to exalt the dignity of man, to free ourselves from the tyranny of non-human power.
Okay.
The goal is to live constantly holding on to the vision of the good. And then the tough part is to go back down into the messy world of fact, but keep holding that vision.
He uses that incredible image, man's life being like a long march through the night.
Yeah, surrounded by invisible enemies, tired, watching friends vanish from our sight, knowing that doom, that death is unavoidable.
It sounds almost despairing.
The sense of powerlessness against the universe is there. It's profound, but the conclusion is where the defiance really sparks.
So
He says, despite all this, man must cherish the lofty thoughts that ennoble his little day. He must scorn the coward terrors and worship at the shrine that his own hands have built.
building your own meaning.
Exactly. Preserve a mind free, sustain the world shaped by your own ideals, even when facing this crushing, unconscious power. It's a tough stance, but a powerful one about finding meaning within.
Wow. Okay, from confronting cosmic despair, where do you go? How about something a bit cozier?
H.M. Tomlinson provides the perfect antidote, actually. His essay, Bed Books and Nightlights.
Bed books. What does he recommend for late night reading when the universe feels a bit much?
Well, he paints a picture. Midnight, you're alone, just a candle flickering, very different vibe.
Definitely.
And his rules for picking a book are wonderfully practical for that specific moment. He says absolutely no books that are too improving.
Nothing that requires too much effort.
Right, no attentive effort when you're already tired. Forget the literary critics for now.
I loved his honesty about the great works which every gentleman ought to have read, but which some of us have not. So relatable.
Isn't it? And his little jab that there's almost as much clotted nonsense written about literature as there is about theology.
He's got a point there.
He does. He finds comfort in things that are maybe a bit flawed, a bit human. He suggests stuff like Pepys' Diary calls it benedictory by a sinning soul.
Nice.
And he thinks the classics, like Swift's Gulliver, specifically the weird horse part, the Houyhnhnms, are best read at that hour, seen distantly from another and a more tranquil place. The mind's clearer then, somehow.
Able to appreciate the cleverness without the daytime noise. Speaking of cleverness, and maybe a bit less tranquility, let's shift to Don Marquis.
Yes. Don Marquis was right.
That's the one. Morley points him out as a major American humorist.
And Marquis, famous for the old soak, gives us his blueprint for the almost perfect state.
What's the main rule?
The main rule is simple. Everyone gets at least 10 years before he dies of easy, carefree, happy living. Just 10 years of bliss at the end.
And what's his idea of bliss for those 10 years?
Oh, it's brilliant. He wants dissipation and indolence and unreverend disrepute.
After working hard for 50 years.
Exactly. He mischievously contrasts that with people who might prefer prunes and morality.
His cynicism can be pretty sharp, too. Like that line about Americans accepting any foreign import except Swedish matches and Spanish influenza.
Spot on. He has that quick wit. But there's also a surprising depth, especially when he looks at city life.
Like the Manhattan Towers.
Yeah, he describes that stark contrast. The towers themselves, wonderful under the stars, versus the reality on the ground. The dirty old shed of the trolleys, the pasty streets that stink, being trampled by greasy little profiteers.
Ouch.
It leads him to this really probing question, though. How can these beautiful things, these growths like the towers, possibly come from such awful soil, this sordid, greedy, kind of lawless reality?
How is beauty made by such a breed?
Yeah. It's a paradox about cities, about human creation itself. Really makes you think.
Okay, so we've had philosophy, cozy reading, cynical city views. How about some straight-up edge-of-your-seat drama? Davy William Bone.
Right, from Merchantmen at Arms. And Bone knew his stuff born at sea, became an engineer. This feels incredibly real.
He puts you right on that ship deck in wartime, doesn't he?
Absolutely. You feel the routine, like writing up the log, tapping the barometer, things that usually mean security.
It's wartime.
Exactly. So that security is thin, you see debris floating by from another ship that got hit, and then boom, alarm, chaos.
The description of the panic is just
Yeah.
visceral. Decks jammed, people can't move, and that specific cry. God. Oh, God. Oh, Christ.
And the way he notes the tone of that cry, not excited, not even agonized, but like dull, hopeless, despair.
Chilling. That detail makes it so vivid.
And then you get these sharp contrasts within the chaos. The army officer just acting totally cool, nonchalant,
Holding it together.
while the chief engineer gives this utterly hopeless report as the water's already washing over the foredeck. The troops are scared, obviously, but they're held in check by the officer's calm.
And then the rescue. The destroyer, the rifleman, showing up.
Yeah. And what really struck me, and you mentioned it too, was Bone noticing, even in that moment of terror, the sheer skill involved.
The captain's maneuver.
The precision of the destroyer captain's maneuver, yeah. carefully avoiding the lifeboats, the men already in the water, bringing his ship right alongside, recognizing that professional excellence, even with death looming, that's something else.
It really is a moment of order amidst it all. Okay, let's shift gears dramatically again, from high seas drama to something tiny. Logan Pearsall Smith's trivia.
Ah, yes. Morley calls his style pure culture of the essay, like little ivory trinkets.
They really are. Just these perfect little snapshots of thought.
Yeah.
Like walking alone, looking at the stars, and suddenly feeling like a prince of the star universe.
Or just comparing his mind to a spider's web. It's the smallness, the precision.
And the wit. That bit about pondering the idea that everyone lives for pleasure while watching a bishop and feeling this sense of low complicity.
Haha. Wondering if the bishop's just after his own kind of pleasure, too. It's brilliant.
Or his Anglican moments at church, feeling relieved they weren't likely to have any unseemly manifestations of religious fervor.
It's that very subtle, very English, witty observation of himself and the world around him, all packed into these tiny, polished little pieces.
So good. Now, from tiny observations to maybe an unexpected place for profound thought, a seller, George Saintsbury.
Right, the famous literary historian. And his essay is on beer and cider.
Not quite the topic you'd expect.
Exactly. It's from his book, Notes on a Cellar Book, and Morley includes it as a prime example of how pleasantly a great scholar can unbend. The whole setting is just him in his cellar, talking about drinks he's known.
And the anecdotes are so specific and charming, drinking new ale that frothed up creamily.
The very best base he ever drank. His Cambridge friends falling into a ditch after some particularly strong old base.
It humanizes him completely.
Totally. And he has opinions. Strong ones. He likes younger Scotch ale. Bass is #1. He reckons the Scots really prefer whiskey to ale. He even quotes someone calling cider windy.
Huh. Windy drinks.
It just shows how character and memory and even a kind of, informal expertise can come through in talking about something seemingly simple like beer preferences.
Okay, back to the city, but a very different scene. Simeon Strunsky's The Night Court. Morley really rated his ability to capture urban life.
Yeah, and Strunsky gives us this fascinating perspective. He describes the night court through the eyes of a woman who's arrested regularly. For her, it's routine.
Just paying a fine.
Right. She even sees the court itself as progress and advance in civilization compared to dealing with corrupt bail bondsmen.
But what you highlighted earlier that was really interesting was her focus. She wasn't caught up in feeling pitied by the onlookers.
No, she was looking at them, studying their clothes, how they looked. They were fellows from this other world she only ever read about in the society pages.
Which leads to Strunsky's big idea.
Yeah, this really provocative question. Why people think that life is only what they see and hear and not what they read of.
Meaning?
Well, he argues that the typical visitor to the night court doesn't actually see or hear anything new there, nothing they couldn't get from the newspaper in more detail, but the prisoner. For her, watching those people, that was seeing life. Her lived experience was shaped by observing this world she knew mostly through reading.
That's a really complex point about perception, about how what we consume shapes our reality. Okay, let's shift to something deeply personal now. William Allen White's portrait of his daughter, Mary White.
This one is so moving. Just a beautiful, heartbreaking tribute. White describes his daughter Mary, who is nearly 17.
She knew everyone in town, right?
Everyone waved to people constantly from her horse. And her friends were completely mixed, black and white, above the track and below the track, as he puts it. No social barriers for her.
And her personality just jumps off the page.
Doesn't it? Riotous stories, persiflage, like witty banter was just her normal way of talking. A bubble of joy.
Thinking in hyperbole and metaphor.
Exactly. Mischievous, enjoyed being known at school.
And her social life sounded incredible. Using her car like a free taxi.
Her jitney bus, yeah. Picking up absolutely everybody. White and black, old and young, rich and poor. She'd take people from the county poor home out for rides. Just amazing generosity.
But it wasn't just generosity. There was a real social conscience there, too, wasn't there?
Oh, definitely. And it feels quite modern, actually. Her last big project was fighting to get a proper restroom for black girls at the high school.
After finding a girl reading in the toilet.
Yes. And White says this injustice inflamed her, turned her into a nagging harpy about it. She hungered and thirsted for righteousness.
But he adds that contrast.
Right, that wonderful line. She was also the most impious creature. She joined the church to do things to help people, not out of personal piety. Clothes, jewelry, totally uninterested.
Such a vivid picture. And then the description of the accident. It's so stark.
Heartbreakingly simple. Riding her horse, Poncho, waved back at a friend. The horse shied under a low tree limb. And White writes, she didn't fall, slipped off, dazed a bit. That understatement just lands like a punch.
It really does.
Yeah.
What a portrait. Okay. From that intense personal focus, let's go wide again. Nature, Stuart Edward White's The Silent Places.
Yes, Morley mentions White's mix of being a naturalist and a poet.
You feel that blend. He really captures the sound of the wilderness, doesn't he?
He does. The rapids aren't just noise. He hears these other softer sounds underneath, like tear forms swimming across the field of vision, things you only notice when you relax your focus.
And the distant sounds.
The huntsman.
Yeah, like the ghosts of old voyagers whispering to the exiled sons out there in the wild. It's quite mystical.
And he contrasts those river sounds with the forest at night.
The great silence, yeah. Broken only by tiny little woods noises.
Yeah.
He gets this feeling that the forces of the world seem in suspense, like everything's holding its breath, dwelling in the silent places. And the specific images are beautiful. Cleaning out the brooks in spring.
Oh yeah, late February. Hastening yellow waters. Clearing the dreary wreckage, setting the water princess free, and then the water goes curtsying and dimpling over the shining gravel. Just lovely.
Observing the deer, the woodchucks, the quiet otter.
It's that really keen, almost spiritual attention to the subtle life of the natural world.
Okay, from the quiet woods to the abstract world of ideas. George Santayana. The poetry of transition.
Right, Santayana's digging into how poetry actually affects us. His idea is that it kind of dismantles our everyday concepts.
How so?
It takes them back to the raw, sensuous qualities, the feelings, the images that we experienced before we slapped a label on them. Our rational intellect usually filters out the emotion for practical reasons, right?
Makes sense.
But poetry, Santayana says, brings that emotion back. The poet stops at the image just to enjoy it, rather than using it as a stepping stone to somewhere else.
In his point about language.
He argues that our normal workaday language names things, not images, souls, not voices and silhouettes. It's a tool. We use it to navigate the world, select bits of experience, piece them together.
Art is necessary.
Absolutely. And he actually says that process is literally poetic because we are making ideas from the Greek poiein, to make. But what capital P poetry does is take those made ideas and reconnect them to their sensory, emotional origins.
That's quite a deep dive into how we think. Okay, maybe time for something lighter again.
Perfect timing. A.A. Milne. Yes, that A.A. Milne.
Winnie the Pooh.
The very same. And his essay is called A Word for Autumn. Morley describes it perfectly as urbane pleasantry.
And he starts by tweaking Keats.
He does. Hilariously suggests maybe Keats should have written season of mists and mellow celery instead of fruitfulness. Celery. And he gives this wonderfully affectionate, surprisingly detailed ode to celery, unfolding the layers, finding the whiteness and sweetness of those inner shoots.
It's unexpectedly charming. And that anecdote he tells.
Oh, the inn. Saving the very best bit of celery heart for last.
And someone else at the table reaches for it. The horror.
Exactly. He contrasts the public shared cheese with the intensely private personal significance of his celery. It's just a perfect, tiny, witty capture of human nature.
So good. Okay, now for Hilaire Belloc. On the Making of Hay. Another fascinating figure.
Belloc is complex. French father, English mother, served in the military, was an MP. Morley sees in him a blend of French and English genius.
And this essay is very grounded, right? In his specific place.
Very. The Sussex landscape he knew intimately. He describes the whole practical process of haymaking, stressing how crucial timing is, finding the exact moment to cut the grass, thinking about rain, different kinds of grass.
And his advice on using a scythe. Treat it honorably, like a pendulum.
It elevates the work, doesn't it? Gives it dignity.
What I found really interesting was his description of bargaining in the valley.
Oh yeah, the local custom. He sees it not just as business, but as a kind of courteous pastime. Almost, yeah. Using these ritual phrases to dress up the dry bones of commerce, greed, need, calculation, with this pretty body of fiction and observances.
Like saying, I don't be thinking of selling the pig anyway.
Exactly. When you absolutely are. Or I'll tell you what I will do. It's a whole social dance built around the transaction. A glimpse into culture tied to labor.
And that final scene is so peaceful. Resting after mowing, talking, hearing another scythe being sharpened nearby.
Raking the hay into tall cocks to keep the dew off. He captures that feeling of the beneficent and deliberate evening. the valley getting more solemn and dim. It's work, but it's deeply satisfying work, connected to the land.
Beautiful. Let's turn to another giant, Joseph Conrad, his author's note for The Nigger of the Narcissus.
Conrad, such a unique background, Polish, choosing the sea, really breaking from his roots.
And he reflects here on what the artist is trying to do.
Yeah, his famous line, the task is to make you see. But he also talks about the novelist being a figure behind the veil, meaning full self-disclosure isn't really possible, or maybe even desirable in art. He worries about showing himself too much, that it might destroy the opinion one had of the work itself.
So he admits autobiography is always in there somewhere.
It has to be. But he says he has a repugnance for the open display of sentiment. He values dignity, reserve, decency in his writing.
He also touches on the complexity of emotion, doesn't he?
He does, how the comic takes upon itself a face of pain. How some kinds of grief can make a person seem august, almost noble.
And his view on judging people.
It's really nuanced. He says he can't just love or hate based on abstract principles. He prefers what he calls resignation.
But not passive resignation.
No, not mystic or detached. It's resignation, open-eyed, conscious and informed by love, seeing human life with both admiration and pity, offering a sigh maybe, not a sob, a smile, not a grin. It's a deeply compassionate but unsentimental view.
Profound. Okay, let's bring in a very different kind of wisdom. So William Osler, the famous physician, his address, Equanimitas.
Osler. Morley praises his generous wisdom and infectious enthusiasm.
And his big message for students is pretty straightforward, isn't it?
Amazingly simple. His master word is just work. Plain and simple. He talks about needing a thirsty desire for knowledge and steadfastness of purpose.
And thoroughness.
Yes. Thoroughness is the pearl of great price, and you get it through concentration. He warns strongly against being a dilettante, someone who's imperfectly equipped, who won't take time to get to the heart of a matter. Feels timely.
Definitely. What surprised me was his call to get denationalized early.
Yeah, that's quite forward-thinking for the time. The true student, he argues, must be a citizen of the world. Keep up with scholars everywhere, share knowledge, don't reinvent the wheel. Travel is vital.
And he believes genius can pop up anywhere.
Anywhere. A strong propensity of nature, he calls it. Doesn't matter if you're from a big city or a small village. And crucially, the student needs freedom.
Freedom from what?
Freedom from the purely utilitarian spirit, the voice always asking, cui bono? That's the practical good of this. He defends learning for its own sake.
He also finds poetry in ordinary life.
Absolutely. The true poetry of life isn't in grand drama, but in the commonplace, the ordinary person, the toil-worn woman, and, vital for a doctor, he stresses humor, says, nobody laughs more often than the doctor. You need it.
And the core message from the title, Equanimitas.
Equanimity, imperturbability, calmness, essential for doctors, he says. It's a huge mistake to go among patients pulling a long face. You need that steady center.
He also gives some practical advice. Balance books and people.
Yeah, divide attention equally between books and men, meaning people. And he recognizes it can be hard to overcome shyness, or bookishness calls it being dysopic.
And he even mentions being a lark or an owl.
Just briefly, yeah. Acknowledging different work styles as just natural types, not flaws. It's all part of that broad, humane understanding.
Okay, from profound wisdom to poking fun at human creations. Steve Leacock.
Leacock, known for humor, fables. And here he tackles the drama up to date.
And his basic complaint is?
He hilariously contrasts the old melodramas with the newer plays of his time. Old drama, he says, had action happening suddenly and all in a lump.
In exciting places.
Right. A lighthouse, a madhouse, a powerhouse, always somewhere dramatic. But modern drama, he finds it feeble, characters just walk around.
And his anecdote about writing a play?
Oh, it's priceless. He needed a scene in a condemned cell. So he decided the easiest way was just to pick a character who ought to be put to death and write them into it.
Just find someone killable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He completely sends up the artificiality, and his description of the old lighthouse play, the darkness, the storm, the staggering, the dramatic reveal of the daughter on the reef, it's a perfect, funny critique of those old cliches, humor as commentary.
Brilliant. Okay, let's wrap up our tour of these essays with Heywood Brown and the 51st Dragon.
Brown, the newspaper man. Very skilled at using fables.
And this one is about Sir Gawain.
Young Sir Gawain, yeah. He's training to fight dragons at night school, basically. The headmaster gives him a supposedly magic word, Rumplesnitz.
Rumplesnitz.
Tells him if he just says the word, he'll be perfectly safe. builds his confidence.
So Gawain goes out, faces his first real dragon.
Terrified. But he says the word, swings his axe, and poof, dragon dead. Easy. He kills 49 more, totally believing in the magic word.
Until
the 51st dragon. He forgets the word, panics, and the dragon gets him. But here's the twist, Bryn reveals.
there was no magic.
None at all. Killing the dragons was actually easy. The word Rumpelsnitz. The headmaster admits it was just to give him a certain confidence. It didn't give him power, it just unlocked the confidence to use the power he already had. It's such a clever little story about belief, psychology, and, well, maybe self-delusion sometimes being necessary.
Okay. Stepping back from all these individual pieces, what does this collection mean? We've bounced from Russell's Cosmic Dread to Milne's Celery, from Bone's Shipwreck to Sainsbury's Beer Cellar.
It's an incredible range, isn't it? But maybe that is the point, if we connect it back to Morley's idea of the essay.
As an attempt.
Yeah, and as a showcase for that rich bouquet of personality, this collection is that bouquet. It shows the essay form as this incredibly flexible space.
Room for all kinds of voices.
Conrad's dignity, Marquis' cynicism, Smith's delicate wit, William Allen White's raw grief, and room for all kinds of attempts to understand the world, whether looking outwards like Strunsky at the court or Stuart Edward White in the woods.
Or inwards, like Russell wrestling with ideals or Smith observing his own thoughts.
Exactly. It handles deep seriousness and light urbanity equally well.
What also strikes me is where these writers find value. It's often in unexpected places.
Totally. Santayana finds it in the structure of language itself. Saintsbury finds it reflecting on his cellar. Tomlinson finds it in choosing the right book at midnight. Strunsky finds it in the gaze of a prisoner. Bone finds it in pure skill amidst chaos.
It's about looking closely, isn't it? At the overlooked, the commonplace.
Finding significance there. And you see those recurring tensions playing out across the essays, too.
Like ideal versus reality.
Definitely. Russell, Marquis, or routine versus the subtle event, like in Bone's piece. Or appearance versus the underlying truth, Strunsky's prisoner, Braun's magic word.
So the collection really highlights our human capacity for both really sharp observation,
Like Stuart Edward White or Bone.
and for imaginative interpretation, or maybe even like necessary self-belief.
Yeah, like Santayana thinking about poetry, or Braun's fable about confidence. It suggests we need both to look closely at the world and to interpret it, to find or make meaning within it. Personality shapes perspective.
So we've taken quite a journey through Christopher Morley's modern essays, hosted by him, meeting just some of the incredible voices and ideas he brought together. And remember, this was just a selection for the sources you provided.
And I hope it shows that these essays, even though they're about a century old now, they still feel surprisingly relevant. They offer these really unique windows onto human experience, onto society, art, how we find meaning, or just how we get through the day.
It makes you think about Bryn's dragon story again. What are our own magic words? You know, the beliefs we hold, the perspectives we choose, the routines that get us through. How does what you decide to focus on, what you choose to read or see, how does that shape the reality you experience?
Like the night court prisoner finding her life and watching the spectators, or the naturalist finding his in the forest silence.
Exactly. How does your focus shape your world? Something to maybe mull over.
Definitely.
We really encourage you to seek out some of these writers if any caught your interest. There's so much more in Morley's collection and beyond.
Absolutely worth exploring.
Thank you so much for providing the sources for this deep dive.